We were all trying our best to love each other deeply, but we forgot to say I love you to each other. When the alarm on Lu Jinnian's phone rang, Qiao Anhao was the first to wake up from her dream. She turned over and found herself sleeping in Lu Jinnian's arms. She was stunned for 2 seconds before realizing what had happened. Her whole body felt as if it had been electrocuted, and she abruptly jumped out of bed and rushed towards the bathroom. Qiao Anhao's movements were rather large, and coupled with the phone's alarm, they woke up Lu Jinnian. As soon as Lu Jinnian opened his eyes, he saw Qiao Anhao darting into the bathroom. Even though it was just a brief glance, Lu Jinnian clearly saw that Qiao Anhao was completely naked. Lu Jinnian's brows furrowed deeply, and his gaze subconsciously swept around the bedroom, taking in the messy scene. Lu Jinnian had drunk quite a bit last night, and the hangover made his head ache slightly, but it didn't affect his thinking at all. In just a second he understood what had happened between him and Qiao Anhao last night. It turned out that it wasn't a dream he had but reality. Lu Jinnian's eyes instantly turned cold, and his hand tightened around the blanket. In the next second, he forcefully threw the blanket off, his face filled with rage as he strode towards the bathroom. Qiao Anhao only dared to take a deep breath after closing the bathroom door. She had also drunk some alcohol last night, and in her half-awake state, she vaguely snuggled into Lu Jinnian's arms. She thought it was a dream, so she boldly kissed him, and then the two of them naturally crossed the line. But who would have thought that everything was actually real? She and Lu Jinnian had been married for 2 months, but it wasn't a marriage for love. The outside world didn't know they were husband and wife, so during these 2 months, they had tacitly agreed not to touch each other, and when they left the house they pretended to be strangers. But now she had actually broken this tacit understanding. What would Lu Jinnian's reaction be when he woke up? Thinking of this, a layer of panic and fear surfaced in Qiao Anhao's heart. After a long while, Qiao Anhao tremblingly turned on the faucet. Just as she was about to wash her face with cold water to calm herself down, the bathroom door was suddenly kicked open with a bang. Lu Jinnian strode towards her angrily, grabbed her wrist, and forcefully flung her backward. Then he grabbed her neck tightly and pressed her against the wall behind her. Lu Jinnian's movements were somewhat hasty and forceful. Qiao Anhao felt a pain in her back as she hit the wall, and she couldn't help but gasp. Before she could finish inhaling, Lu Jinnian's voice, cold and harsh, came from above her head. Qiao Anhao, I didn't expect you to have the ability to take advantage of others. You actually threw yourself at me while I was drunk. Lu Jinnian paused here, as if he had suddenly remembered something. His gaze darkened slightly, and he tightened his grip on Qiao Anhao's neck, forcing her chin upward. He stared into her eyes, his voice colder than the air conditioning in the bathroom, laced with a chilling icy tone. Qiao Anhao, if I'm not mistaken, on our wedding night, the first thing you said to me, with that innocent and virtuous act of yours, was don't touch me. Is that right? So what? Just 2 months after we got married, have you already changed your mind? You can't wait for me to touch you now. When Lu Jinnian spoke, his perfectly sculpted face remained expressionless. Even his beautiful, dark eyes held the usual calm and indifference. Only the hand around her neck tightened more and more as he spoke, sending a wave of cold, angry energy through him that made the air feel frigid and suffocating. Qiao Anhao, already nervous and flustered by the situation, now felt even more panicked under his questioning. Her whole body trembled, and even her toes were shaking. She bit her lip, trying to gather her thoughts, but no words came out. Lu Jinnian didn't say anything more, seemingly patient, waiting for her to respond. The bathroom was eerily quiet, and his eyes never left her delicate, beautiful face. Qiao Anhao felt a sense of dread rise in her chest, as though he could see right through her thoughts. Her heart raced faster and faster, and just when she thought she couldn't endure the pressure any longer, Lu Jinnian spoke again, breaking the silence. Or have you always wanted something to happen between us? Qiao Anhao's body jerked at his words. Could he really have figured out what was going on in her mind? A panic flashed in her eyes. Trying to hide something, she blurted out without thinking. I want to star in the TV drama Endless Love. Her words interrupted Lu Jinnian mid-sentence. Perhaps because Qiao Anhao spoke so suddenly, Lu Jinnian didn't quite catch what she said. He froze for a moment, his expression slightly confused, and there was a long pause before he spoke again. Qiao Anhao could feel her heart pounding so loudly she thought it might leap out of her chest. She forced herself to remain steady, focusing on his face. So dazzling and exquisite, it seemed almost unreal. She kept her composure, speaking calmly. You know, I've been in the entertainment industry for over half a year now, but I haven't landed a decent role. And you? You control everything in this industry. If you say the word, I could definitely get a role in Endless Love. She paused for a moment, then after 5 seconds, pressed her lips together and added in a measured, unhurried tone. And last night was my way of paying you back. As soon as she finished speaking, Lu Jinnian's pupils contracted sharply, his anger barely held in check. His fingers, still gripping her neck, trembled as if fighting to suppress an explosion of rage. The next second, he let out a short, bitter laugh. Qiao Anhao, are you trying to play the casting couch game with me? His laughter was brief, just 2 soft chuckles, before the smile vanished, replaced by a cold, piercing glare. His words were venomous and low, dripping with disdain. Fine, Qiao Anhao, you want to play with me? Then I'll make sure you regret it. With a look that could kill, Lu Jinnian gritted his teeth and spat out his last sentence. He abruptly withdrew the hand that had been gripping Qiao Anhao's neck and strode away without another glance. I'll play you to death. Qiao Anhao's long eyelashes trembled, and her face paled slightly. She remained motionless, pressed against the wall, until the deafening slam of the door echoed from outside. Only then did she swallow hard, her lips pressed tightly together, and sank weakly to the floor, tears welling up in her eyes. Was it really to get a role in Till Death Do Us Part that she had climbed into his bed? She had only used her desire to appear in Till Death Do Us Part as an excuse to conceal her true feelings. And that feeling, a secret she held close to her heart, was that she loved him. Yes, loved him. She had secretly loved him for 13 long years. She dared not let him know, nor could she let him know. She had thought she could hide it all well, but she never expected that last night, after just a few drinks, she would reveal her heart. She had overestimated herself after all. Despite Qiao Anhao's initiative in climbing into Lu Jinnian's bed and the anger it had provoked 3 days later, she received a call from the Till Death Do Us Part production team, inviting her to audition. Qiao Anhao didn't know if her role was due to Lu Jinnian's orders or the director's arrangement. The character she was to play wasn't a major protagonist, but neither was it an insignificant supporting role. It was, however, 1,000 times better than any role she had played before. Because the role was obtained through improper means, Qiao Anhao's audition was merely a formality. She signed the contract on the spot after the audition. 3 days later, Qiao Anhao officially joined the crew and began filming. The next day, Lu Jinnian flew to Rome to shoot his new movie. The two, who had been married for 2 months, went their separate ways after a single night of passion. 3 months later, after 3 months of filming, Till Death Do Us Part wrapped up in a luxurious villa on the eastern outskirts of Beijing, rented by the crew for 30 million yuan. The entire team was jubilant, especially the director, who generously booked the top-floor hall of the Grand Hotel in Beijing for the wrap party. The filming ended at 3 p.m. The crew needed to pack up the props, and the actors had to remove their makeup and change clothes, so the wrap party was scheduled for 8 p.m. Lu Jinnian, who had been in Rome recently, returned to China for 2 days during a break in filming due to some minor issues at his company. Due to the tight schedule, Lu Jinnian had no time to recover from the long flight. He went straight to the company from Beijing International Airport. Upon arrival, the senior executives were already waiting in the conference room. Lu Jinnian didn't even have time for a sip of water before the meeting began. The meeting lasted from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. When Lu Jinnian returned to his office, his assistant followed him in. Mr. Lu, I've booked a flight to Rome for tonight at 12 a.m. This way you'll have almost 15 hours to rest before filming. The long flight and an afternoon of meetings had left Lu Jinnian looking somewhat tired. He sat in his office chair, listening to his assistant report his itinerary while casually pulling out his phone, which had been silenced during the meeting. Seeing no unimportant messages, he was about to lock the screen when his WeChat notification pinged. As if possessed, Lu Jinnian clicked on it and saw a message in the WeChat group. Till Death Do Us Part has officially wrapped. Tonight at 8 p.m., we're having a wrap party at the Capital Grand Hotel. Friends who are free are welcome to come. Lu Jinnian stared at the message for about 5 seconds before calmly raising his head and nodding at his assistant's report, indicating that he understood. The assistant had been with Lu Jinnian for many years and was familiar with his cold and reticent nature. So, with an unchanged expression, he continued, "Mr. Lu, your flight is in 6 hours. Will you have dinner in the city, or go directly to the airport to eat?" "Let's eat in the city," Lu Jinnian said softly. Without waiting for his assistant to ask where to eat, he continued, "Capital Grand Hotel." Lu Jinnian and his assistant finished dinner. It was already 8:30 p.m. After paying the bill, the two walked one after the other to the main entrance of the Capital Grand Hotel. When Lu Jinnian stopped, the assistant quickly stopped as well. "Mr. Lu, is there anything wrong?" Lu Jinnian remained silent for a long time. As the assistant was wondering if he should ask again, Lu Jinnian spoke, his voice calm and devoid of any emotion. "You go to the car and wait for me. I have something to do. I'll go upstairs." After speaking, Lu Jinnian stood at the entrance of the Capital Grand Hotel for a few more seconds before turning and walking towards the elevator. Qiao Anhao, having starred in the drama Till Death Do Us Part, naturally had to attend the wrap party. As soon as she returned to the city, she showered, changed, styled her hair, and applied light makeup at the fastest speed possible before rushing to the Capital Grand Hotel. However, even so, Qiao Anhao was still a little late. When she arrived, the director of Till Death Do Us Part was standing on the stage, delivering a cliched thank you speech. Fortunately, everyone's attention was on the director, and no one noticed the late Qiao Anhao. She stood outside the crowd looking around, then walked towards her agent Zhao Meng, who was standing at the outermost layer. The director's speech wasn't long. After it ended, the banquet officially began. Since it was a banquet, toasting and exchanging pleasantries were inevitable. Although Qiao Anhao wasn't a top-tier celebrity in the entertainment industry, she was beautiful, had a great figure, and a good temperament. Plus, she knew how to talk to different people appropriately. So she navigated the banquet flawlessly, with impeccable manners and elegance. After Qiao Anhao had toasted everyone at the banquet, she was starving. Without any hesitation, she pulled Zhao Meng to the buffet area, selected some food, and then found a window seat in the seating area. However, before Qiao Anhao could eat a few bites, the originally noisy and lively banquet hall suddenly fell silent. Qiao Anhao swallowed the food in her mouth and curiously raised her head. Following everyone's gaze, she saw Lu Jinnian at a glance. "Qiao Anhao, are you playing by unspoken rules with me?" "Alright, Qiao Anhao, you want to play with me? Fine, I'll play you to death." Qiao Anhao's hand holding the chopsticks subconsciously tightened its grip, and her heart in her left chest began to pound. That day, he must have been extremely angry to have cursed so harshly. For the past 3 months she had been avoiding him, but no matter how she tried to hide, they still ended up running into each other. A well-tailored black suit perfectly showcased Lu Jinnian's tall and slender figure. The bright lights of the banquet hall fell on his face, making his already exquisite and perfect features even more three-dimensional. With a straight nose, thin lips, expressive eyes, he was so handsome and delicate that he was breathtaking. The entertainment industry has never lacked handsome men and beautiful women. Any one of them would be a dazzling presence in a crowd on the street. However, Lu Jinnian had a unique charm, which was that he could instantly make everything around him pale in comparison, effortlessly becoming the center of attention. The entire banquet hall fell silent for about half a minute because of his sudden appearance. The director of Eternal Love was the first to recover, holding a wine glass and approaching him with flattering hospitality. "Mr. Lu." Following the director's words, the atmosphere in the banquet hall eased slightly. Although everyone knew that their greetings wouldn't be acknowledged, they still smiled and greeted Lu Jinnian. "Hello, Mr. Lu." Lu Jinnian seemed to have not heard the greetings around him. He just walked towards the seating area with his eyes fixed ahead, neither fast nor slow. Even though it was just the most ordinary of gestures, he still managed to make it look captivating. The director, holding his wine glass, followed Lu Jinnian like a puppy, his face full of smiles as he chattered incessantly. Qiao Anhao was sitting in the seating area. Initially, separated by the crowd in some distance, she dared to let her gaze linger on Lu Jinnian for a while. As Lu Jinnian got closer and closer to her, she only dared to occasionally peek at him from under her eyelids. Finally, when Lu Jinnian was about to reach her, she didn't even dare to lift her head. She just sat stiffly in her seat, holding her chopsticks and awkwardly picking at the food on her plate, completely losing the composure and ease she had before Lu Jinnian's arrival. Mr. Lu, why didn't you tell me in advance that you were coming? I would have sent someone to pick you up. As the director's words reached Qiao Anhao's ears, she clearly felt Lu Jinnian walk to her seat. She subconsciously tightened her grip on her chopsticks, her back straightened, her eyes fixed on the food on her plate. Even the movement of chewing her food became cautious. Finally, when Lu Jinnian walked past her, Qiao Anhao was just about to breathe a sigh of relief, but she realized that Lu Jinnian pulled out the chair behind her and sat down. When Qiao Anhao first fell for Lu Jinnian, she dreamed of seeing him every day. But over time, she started to become afraid of facing him. When he was far away, everything felt fine. But as soon as he got close, she felt an unexplainable sense of nervousness and fear. And that was before the incident that happened 3 months ago. Right now, he was sitting just behind her. His voice, his presence, she could feel it all so clearly. Qiao Anhao's palms were sweating from the tension. Lu Jinnian was discussing movies and TV shows with the director. His words were few, with most of the conversation coming from the director. But every time Lu Jinnian spoke, it sent a shiver deep inside Qiao Anhao's heart. Eventually, she couldn't take it any longer. She put her chopsticks down, and finding an excuse to go to the bathroom, she stood up and made her way to the exit. Maybe it was a coincidence, but just as Qiao Anhao stood, Lu Jinnian stood up too. The bathroom was behind her, and the exit to the banquet hall was behind him. So when she turned, he turned as well, and they unexpectedly bumped into each other. Qiao Anhao's gaze met his for just a brief moment before she quickly looked down, avoiding his eyes. It had been 5 months since Qiao Anhao and Lu Jinnian got married, but since their marriage was kept secret to the outside world, they were just strangers with no connection at all. Her hand clenched into a fist, trying hard to suppress the tremor inside her. Like everyone else, she acted as though she didn't know Lu Jinnian, greeting him respectfully with a polite, "Mr. Lu." Lu Jinnian's expression didn't change in the slightest. He stood motionless, his gaze slightly unfocused, as if he hadn't heard her at all. After a long pause, he blinked, then turned away and took a side route, striding toward the banquet hall's exit without a glance in her direction. Throughout the entire encounter, he didn't even spare her a second glance, as if the woman standing in front of him wasn't his wife of 5 months at all. Lu Jinnian was known for his cold, aloof personality, which made him seem unapproachable. Now that he was at the top of the entertainment industry, with power that could rival anyone's, people couldn't help but feel a sense of nervousness and caution when they saw him. Once he left, the atmosphere in the banquet hall gradually returned to the lively, noisy energy it had before his arrival. Of course, his sudden appearance had also sparked some gossip. Lu Jinnian really is a legend in the entertainment world. Not just a legend, he's practically a myth. He's been in the industry for 10 years, and there's never been a single rumor or scandal about him. Plus, he built his career from nothing. When he first entered the industry, he was just a poor kid with no money and no background. He went through a lot, endured for nearly 4 years, and finally broke through. After that, he couldn't be stopped. He won Best Actor 6 years in a row, and of the 10 classic films selected online, he starred in 6 of them and played a supporting role in 2. I'd heard that he's a bit of a loner, doesn't like to interact with people much, prefers to do everything alone. But his looks are unmatched in the entertainment industry these past few years, incredibly handsome. Plus he's talented, a first-rate actor. No wonder everyone calls him the nation's husband. Just wondering who this national husband will end up marrying. Speaking of which, he debuted at 18, so he's 28 now, right? Logically, even if he's not married, he should have a girlfriend, shouldn't he? Why haven't we heard a peep? Yeah, let alone a girlfriend, we haven't even caught wind of anyone he's even been vaguely linked to. You think maybe he doesn't like women? Zhao Meng listened to the surrounding chatter, then couldn't help but look up at Qiao Anhao, who was stirring her coffee with a spoon. Wasn't the film he was shooting in Rome not finished yet? Why did he suddenly come back to Beijing? Although Qiao Anhao and Lu Jinnian's marriage was a secret to the public, Zhao Meng, as Qiao Anhao's longtime friend and agent, knew about it. So even though Zhao Meng didn't mention any names, Qiao Anhao understood that the he she was referring to was Lu Jinnian. Qiao Anhao's hand holding the spoon paused slightly, then she looked up at Zhao Meng, shook her head and told the truth. I don't know. You don't know. Zhao Meng looked at Qiao Anhao strangely. Miss Qiao Anhao, are you really his wife? He came back to Beijing from Rome and didn't even call you. Qiao Anhao shook her head again. No. Zhao Meng suddenly remembered the scene when Qiao Anhao and Lu Jinnian had bumped into each other earlier. Lu Jinnian hadn't even glanced at Qiao Anhao the entire time. At the time, she just thought they were putting on an act to hide their marriage, but now she realized that it might not be what she thought. Zhao Meng frowned and asked again, how are things between you two in private? When you're not together, how often do you contact each other? Qiao Anhao lowered her eyes and didn't speak. She and Lu Jinnian didn't have much interaction in private. From their marriage until now 5 months they had spoken less than 3 times. The longest conversation they had was 3 months ago, when she had drunkenly thrown herself at him, and even then, he had only scolded her. Thinking of this, Qiao Anhao's lips curved into a faint smile. She skipped Zhao Meng's first question and answered the second. We haven't had any contact for 3 months. Without saying a word, a tremor of pain ran through Qiao Anhao's heart at Zhao Meng's words. Zhao Meng was right, she was indeed even worse off than a mistress. Although both were essentially paid for companionship, a mistress at least had to earn the favor of her benefactor to keep her position. But she had thrown herself at him, only to earn his anger and disgust in return. Qiao Anhao picked up her coffee and took a deep bitter sip, forcing down the surge of bitterness in her chest. Her voice was calm, almost as if she were speaking about someone else's life when she said, you know as well as I do, my marriage to him was out of necessity. There's no real affection between us, so it's normal that we don't stay in contact. Zhao Meng and Qiao Anhao had known each other since elementary school. Though they had very different interests, their friendship had always been strong. Because of this, Zhao Meng knew a lot about Qiao Anhao's past. After hearing her words, Zhao Meng fell silent for a long while. She kept glancing at Qiao Anhao, whose expression remained calm, as though nothing was wrong. Finally, unable to hold it in any longer, Zhao Meng sighed deeply and spoke up. Qiao, she began. Back in middle and high school, there weren't many girls who could even have a conversation with him. You could count them on one hand, literally just 5 fingers. And you were one of those 5. Back then he treated you well. You two even went out and hung out together several times. But after you both went to college, something changed. Suddenly, you stopped talking to each other completely. Even when you ran into each other, it felt like you were strangers, like you'd never known each other at all. Sometimes he would even seem impatient with you and say some really harsh things. What happened between you two? What happened? For a brief moment, Qiao Anhao's expression became distant, and she stared at her coffee for a long time, as if lost in thought. Finally, she shook her head slowly, her voice soft and filled with uncertainty. I don't know. Over the years, I've wanted to know more than anyone else what really happened back then. When Lu Jinnian walked out of the Beijing Grand Hotel, his assistant was already waiting at the front entrance, the car parked and ready. The assistant immediately got out of the car, opened the rear door for him. Without a word, Lu Jinnian bent slightly and got into the car. As the assistant closed the door, he couldn't help but glance up at Lu Jinnian. The man's strikingly handsome face was set in a tight, grim expression. The assistant felt a wave of unease at the sight of this and quickly shut the door, hurried to the driver's seat, started the engine, and turned the steering wheel to pull the car out. When the corners of his lips tightened, it usually meant he was in a bad mood. It was just that when he finished dinner, his mood seemed indifferent. How could he become like this after going upstairs alone and coming back down? Although the assistant was puzzled, he didn't have the courage to ask Lu Jinnian what had happened. Only when the car drove onto the main road did he speak in a businesslike tone. Mr. Lu, are we going directly to the airport now? Lu Jinnian didn't make a sound. The car became even quieter. Lu Jinnian's temperament was already cold, giving people a feeling of being difficult to approach. At this moment there was an icy aura, mixed with a sense of oppression, emanating from him, making the atmosphere in the car become depressing and cold. The assistant stared straight ahead at the road, not speaking again, just focused on driving, but his heart became increasingly nervous. When the car drove from the second ring road to the third ring road, the fine weather suddenly turned to rain. To ease his nervousness, the assistant spoke again. "It's raining." As the assistant's voice fell, the rain became heavier, and the sound of raindrops filled the car, but Lu Jinnian's voice never sounded. The assistant had spoken twice without getting a response, and this time he completely gave up and fell silent. The rain grew heavier and heavier, the visibility was poor, and the speed of the car slowed down. As the car was about to turn onto the road to the airport, Lu Jinnian, who had been silent, suddenly said, "Stop." Lu Jinnian's voice was not loud, but it was enough for the assistant to hear it clearly. Immediately, the car braked sharply and stopped. The assistant turned to look at Lu Jinnian. "Mr. Lu, what's wrong?" Lu Jinnian didn't speak for a long time, his eyes fixed on a pair of students in school uniforms outside the car window. The pair were running hurriedly in the heavy rain and finally took shelter under the eaves of a building by the roadside. They only stayed there for 2 minutes before a taxi arrived, and they got in and left. But Lu Jinnian's gaze remained fixed on the eaves where the pair had just taken shelter. The assistant didn't understand what Lu Jinnian was looking at. Seeing that he had asked him to stop but hadn't given any further instructions, he couldn't help but speak again. "Mr. Lu." Lu Jinnian still didn't speak, but he seemed a little distracted. Many years ago, on a rainy day like this, he and Qiao Anhao had run into the eaves of a dilapidated building to take shelter from the rain. That was the first time they had met. Neither of them had spoken to the other, they had just looked at each other, and then learned from each other's school uniforms that they were from the same school. "Mr. Lu." After an unknown amount of time, the assistant's voice sounded again in the car. Lu Jinnian's brows twitched slightly, and he turned his head indifferently. His dark and deep eyes were devoid of any color or emotion. Before the assistant could finish his words, Lu Jinnian interrupted him in a light tone. "Get off at the nearest taxi stand." "Ah." And just as he was about to continue speaking, Lu Jinnian's voice remained flat. "I'm not going to Rome today. Change the ticket to tomorrow morning." After the assistant got out of the car, Lu Jinnian sat in the driver's seat, resting his hand on the steering wheel, tapping it intermittently. Finally, as if he had compromised on something, he turned the car key irritably and then skillfully drove the car, turning at the intersection ahead, heading towards the city center. After the wrap-up party for Eternal Love, Zhao Ming drove Qiao Anhao back to Jinxiu Garden. Jinxiu Garden is a famous upscale residential area in Beijing, surrounded by mountains on 3 sides, where every inch of land is worth its weight in gold. Lu Jinnian and Qiao Anhao's wedding house is located in the villa area of Jinxiu Garden. Zhao Ming steadily parked the car at the gate of the villa where Lu Jinnian and Qiao Anhao lived. The rain had stopped by now, and the road was exceptionally clean after being washed. The dim streetlights shone on the accumulated water on the ground, reflecting a bright light. Qiao Anhao said goodbye to Zhao Ming and waited for Zhao Ming to turn the car around and drive away before taking out the key from her bag and opening the gate of the villa. Because it had just rained, the flowers that had originally bloomed in the yard had fallen all over the ground, and the lingering fragrance of flowers mixed with the dampness of the rain wafted faintly. The distance from the gate of the villa to the door of the house was not far, but Qiao Anhao walked very slowly. Lu Jinnian returned to Beijing from Rome. She didn't know if he would come back to Jinxiu Garden tonight. Or rather, was he already in Jinxiu Garden now? After what happened 3 months ago, Qiao Anhao really didn't know how to face Lu Jinnian. At the thought that she might run into him, Qiao Anhao's whole body subconsciously became tense and at a loss. Qiao Anhao stood at the door of the villa, closed her eyes, and took several deep breaths before opening the door with the key. Except for 2 hourly workers who came to clean at regular intervals, there were no live-in servants in the villa, so it seemed particularly quiet. Qiao Anhao stood at the entrance and looked into the living room. Seeing that it was empty, she changed her shoes and slowly went upstairs. Seeing that the upstairs was also empty, Qiao Anhao secretly breathed a sigh of relief. He wasn't in Jinxiu Garden. But she didn't know if he would come over tonight. Apart from the 3 months that they hadn't seen each other, during the first 2 months of their marriage, he would only occasionally come to Jinxiu Garden to stay for a night. Although the time of each visit was not fixed, it would never be later than midnight. It was 11 o'clock in the evening now, which meant that if he didn't come in another hour, it was very likely that he wouldn't come tonight. Time passed slowly in Qiao Anhao's uneasy mood. When the pointer on the bedroom wall turned to 1 o'clock in the morning, Qiao Anhao's body, which had been tense all night, finally relaxed, and she lay weakly on the sofa. It was 1 o'clock in the morning. He definitely wouldn't show up tonight. Qiao Anhao waited until her mood had completely calmed down before she stood up from the sofa, took her pajamas and entered the bathroom. She first turned on the bath water, then stood in front of the vanity to remove her makeup. After washing her face and picking up her toothbrush to squeeze toothpaste, she vaguely heard footsteps outside through the sound of running water. Qiao Anhao froze, her hand instinctively gripping the toothbrush. She paused for a moment before pushing open the bathroom door, and saw Lu Jinnian standing in front of the sofa in the bedroom. Qiao Anhao had been anxious all night wondering if Lu Jinnian would come back, and only relaxed when it got late and she thought he wouldn't. Now seeing him unexpectedly, her heart skipped a beat. Familiar fear and nervousness flooded her. Lu Jinnian seemed to hear the door open and turned his head slightly, his gaze sweeping coldly and emotionlessly over Qiao Anhao. Qiao Anhao shivered under his gaze and subconsciously withdrew her eyes, quickly lowering her head. Although she knew he would most likely ignore her, she hesitated before speaking softly. "You're back." She was giving him the top of her head again, not even bothering to look at him. Lu Jinnian's lips pressed tightly together, his eyes cold as he looked away from Qiao Anhao. He didn't respond to her words at all, but casually raised his hand to unbutton his suit jacket. Qiao Anhao was used to being ignored by Lu Jinnian, but this time, perhaps because of what happened 3 months ago, she was sensitive to a trace of coldness emanating from him the moment she finished speaking. Her nervousness and fear intensified, making her want to run away. She gripped the toothbrush tightly and finally made an excuse to escape. The bathwater might be ready, I'll go take a shower first." Lu Jinnian still showed no intention of responding. He quickly took off his suit jacket, tossed it casually on the sofa, and walked straight out of the master bedroom. It was a while before Qiao Anhao came back to her senses. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath before turning back into the bathroom. If she could, Qiao Anhao really wanted to hide in the bathroom until Lu Jinnian left Jinxiu Garden. But no matter how much she delayed, she would eventually have to come out. As soon as Qiao Anhao opened the bathroom door, she saw Lu Jinnian, who had just finished showering in the next room. He was wearing pajamas, sitting on his usual side of the bed, hands behind his head, eyes closed, pretending to sleep. As soon as Qiao Anhao opened the bathroom door, she saw Lu Jinnian returning from the bathroom next door. He was wearing pajamas and sitting in his usual spot on the bed, hands behind his head, eyes closed in what appeared to be a light nap. Without even fully taking in Lu Jinnian's expression, Qiao Anhao hurriedly averted her gaze, lowering her eyelids as she walked over to the vanity and sat down. The mirror of the vanity directly faced the bed. Every time Qiao Anhao looked into the mirror, she couldn't help but see Lu Jinnian through it. At first, she only dared to steal a quick glance at him, but after a few more attempts, she realized that he always kept his eyes closed, as though he were truly asleep. That was when she began to allow herself to quietly observe him through the mirror while applying her skincare. She could imagine his face completely, even with her eyes closed, but still, from the first time she met him 13 years ago until now, every time she looked at his face, she couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. She wasn't sure if it was because his eyes were closed, but the cold, indifferent aura he usually carried seemed to have dissipated. It softened his features, making his face seem gentler, more approachable. Qiao Anhao found herself staring in a daze, so much so that she forgot to apply the lotion she had poured onto the cotton pad. Though it was just a secret crush of hers, being able to gaze at him so quietly made her heart swell with a warmth and happiness she couldn't put into words. If he were awake and looking at her, she would never dare to stare at him so openly, because she knew she would get lost in his gaze, and he would probably see through all her hidden thoughts and feelings. Her brows softened as a gentle expression crossed her face. She couldn't help but raise her hand and lightly touch his face reflected in the mirror. Then she ran her fingers across his features in the reflection, his brow, the bridge of his nose, until her fingers stopped at his slightly pink lips. In that instant, the memory of 3 months ago resurfaced in her mind, the feeling when she had kissed him of her own accord. Even after 3 months, she could still clearly remember how soft and warm his lips had been. Her heart raced and her fingers lingered, tracing his lips on the mirror again and again. Just as Qiao Anhao was about to lose herself completely in the world of her secret admiration, the sudden ping of a text message broke the silence. Lu Jinnian, lying on the bed, frowned slightly as if disturbed by the sound. Zhou Anhao instantly froze as if startled, and reflexively pulled her hand back. She hurriedly grabbed the cotton pad with lotion on it, and began to apply it to her face in a rushed, careless manner. Probably because she had almost been caught sneaking a look at Lu Jinnian, Zhou Anhao dared not peek at him again through the mirror. Instead, she stiffened her body and focused intently on her reflection, carefully applying her skincare products. In her mind, Zhou Anhao thought to herself that even if Lu Jinnian were to wake up now, by the time she finished applying her products, he would likely have fallen back asleep again. She deliberately slowed her movements to stretch out the process. Once she finished her skincare routine, Zhou Anhao stood up, and using the excuse of standing, sneakily glanced at Lu Jinnian through the mirror. She saw him lying on the bed, holding his phone, looking at something on the screen. As soon as Zhou Anhao noticed that Lu Jinnian was awake, she tensed up. She quietly moved to the side, turned off the bedroom light, and then slowly walked to the bed. Just as she was about to pull back the covers and lie down, she suddenly seemed to remember something. She turned around and walked into the walk-in closet, emerging with a giant teddy bear that was about the same height as her. When Zhou Anhao returned to the bed, holding the bear, Lu Jinnian lazily lifted his head and glanced at her. His gaze was cool, almost indifferent. Zhou Anhao's heart skipped a beat, and she held her breath in fear. Quickly, she lay down with the bear, placing it between herself and Lu Jinnian to create a barrier between them. She breathed a quiet sigh of relief, but her body remained perfectly still, afraid to move even the slightest bit. The bear had been bought after they got married, following the second time they shared a bed. In the beginning, when Zhou Anhao slept near Lu Jinnian, she would get nervous because of her feelings for him. Her heart would race and she would stiffen up. She kept her posture rigid, barely daring to move, but as she drifted off to sleep, her body would relax, and her sleeping position would become more casual. Without realizing it, she would sometimes brush up against him. The first night he had simply pushed her away, but the second night, he had grabbed her and physically tossed her off the bed, then got up, dressed, and left the room. At that moment, Zhou Anhao had realized that he didn't want her touching him, even accidentally, while they were sleeping. To avoid a repeat of that situation, she had bought the large teddy bear the very next day, one that was nearly 6 feet tall. Now, whenever they shared a bed, she would place the bear between them. It acted as a physical barrier to prevent her from accidentally touching him again, and it also gave her the comfort of not being so tense every time they lay down, allowing her to sleep more peacefully. The bedroom was dimly lit by a soft nightlight, the low light making the room feel cozy but also causing her other senses to sharpen. Zhou Anhao lay on the side of the bear, her eyes closed, but sleep wouldn't come. The faint, pleasant scent of Lu Jinnian's cologne lingered in the air, making her heart race and sending an unfamiliar flutter through her chest. The faint sound of Lu Jinnian occasionally tapping his phone screen echoed in her ears. After an unknown amount of time, Lu Jinnian locked his phone screen, and the entire bedroom fell completely silent, so quiet that Zhou Anhao could even hear Lu Jinnian's shallow breathing. Zhou Anhao had lain down in a hurry, and her position was somewhat uncomfortable. She didn't dare to move much, only carefully shifting slightly. But even this small movement startled Lu Jinnian on the other side of the bear. The man suddenly flipped over, his movements quite large, frightening Zhou Anhao into complete stillness. Lu Jinnian seemed to be in a bad mood, as if troubled by something. He would toss and turn every few minutes, disturbing Zhou Anhao, whose attention was entirely focused on him, and preventing her from falling asleep. Suddenly, Lu Jinnian threw off the covers and abruptly sat up. His movements were so sudden that Zhou Anhao's tense heart skipped a beat. Zhou Anhao didn't dare open her eyes to look at Lu Jinnian. She just kept her eyes closed and faintly heard the sound of Lu Jinnian's footsteps, followed by the click of a lighter, and then the faint scent of tobacco drifted into the bedroom. As far as Zhou Anhao knew, she had always thought that Lu Jinnian didn't smoke. This was the first time he had smoked in front of her since they got married. Zhou Anhao couldn't help but wonder when and how Lu Jinnian had learned to smoke. Lu Jinnian took a couple of puffs, glanced at Zhou Anhao lying quietly on the bed and the bear beside her that was even longer and bigger than she was, then turned his head indifferently and walked to the balcony, opening the window. After Lu Jinnian finished smoking and waited for the smell of smoke in the room to dissipate a bit, he closed the window again and walked back to the bedside. This time Lu Jinnian lay down and didn't move again. Without the disturbance of Lu Jinnian's tossing and turning, Zhou Anhao, although nervous, felt her entire body gradually relax and her vigilance lessen because of the bear acting as a barrier between them, and also because she was indeed sleepy and tired. She slowly drifted off to sleep. Qiao Anhao didn't know how long she had slept when suddenly her wrist was grabbed roughly, and a piercing pain shot through her body. Qiao Anhao frowned in her sleep, slowly opened her eyes, and saw Lu Jinnian sitting on the other side of the bear, staring at her with icy eyes. His voice was devoid of warmth as he spoke. "Trying to seduce me again while I'm asleep?" Qiao Anhao's sleepiness vanished instantly. She blinked in confusion, then looked down and found that her hand had somehow reached past the bear to Lu Jinnian's side. Qiao Anhao instinctively wanted to pull her hand back, but Lu Jinnian gripped it even tighter, his tone laced with obvious mockery. "What, just finished filming one drama, and now you're so eager to use your body to get another role?" Qiao Anhao's face paled under Lu Jinnian's sarcastic words. That night's events had created a preconceived notion in his mind, and even if she explained, he might not believe her. Still, she suppressed the hurt in her heart and softly said, "I didn't mean it that way." "Didn't mean it?" Lu Jinnian scoffed mockingly, his eyes filled with coldness. His words were sharp and merciless. "I never thought Miss Qiao would not only be capable of taking advantage of someone's vulnerability, but also be a master of deception. Who was it that climbed into my bed while I was drunk? If I remember correctly that night, you were the one taking the initiative, begging me to sleep with you." Lu Jinnian's words were like knives, slicing into Qiao Anhao's heart, drawing bright red blood. That night, she did beg him, but she was drowsy from the alcohol and thought it was a dream, so she had whispered, "Can you let me be your woman?" Qiao Anhao never imagined that Lu Jinnian would use that night to ridicule her. Instantly, her face flushed crimson with shame and embarrassment. She pinched herself hard, until the pain in her fingers overwhelmed the pain caused by Lu Jinnian's words. Then she calmly explained to him, "I really didn't mean to seduce you. I was just asleep, and my hand somehow touched you. I hope that's the case. But let me tell you, even though you started this game, I'm the one who controls how it's played. You can indeed gain benefits from me with your body, but only if I'm in the mood to sleep with you, not just because you want them." Lu Jinnian paused, his voice filled with arrogant coldness, and continued heartlessly, "If I'm not interested, even if you beg me like you did last time, I wouldn't touch you with a finger." As Lu Jinnian spoke, the color drained from Qiao Anhao's face. While he was speaking, she kept her head lowered, lacking the courage to look up at his expression. After finishing his words, Lu Jinnian coldly released her wrist, got out of bed, and entered the dressing room. When Lu Jinnian came out of the dressing room fully dressed, Qiao Anhao was still in the same position as when he left the bed. Her figure was thin and frail, and with her head lowered, she looked like a scolded elementary school student who had made a mistake. Under the dim light, she seemed particularly innocent. Lu Jinnian stood at the entrance of the dressing room, staring at Qiao Anhao for a moment. Then his gaze darkened, he turned, opened the bedroom door and left. Lu Jinnian had been gone for quite some time before Qiao Anhao slowly lifted her head. She stared at the empty half of the bed where he had just been lying, then pushed the teddy bear away and buried her face in the spot where he had been. The warmth and scent he had left behind still lingered in the sheets. Qiao Anhao greedily inhaled the air where his scent was still present, rubbing her face against the sheets that still held the heat from his body. A bitter feeling began to well up inside her. Even after everything he had said to her, the cruel and hurtful words, she still couldn't help but love him, without any pride or backbone. Zhao Ming's words at the wrap party for the eternal love last night were right. Back then, things between him and her weren't like this. At that time in school, Lu Jinnian had a good relationship with most of the boys, but he always avoided the girls. Qiao Anhao was one of the few girls he could actually talk to. Of course, their conversations weren't because he saw her any differently from the other girls. It was because of Su Jiamu. The Su and Qiao families had been close friends for generations, and Qiao Anhao had grown up with Su Jiamu, so their relationship was quite close. Lu Jinnian, in turn, was Su Jiamu's older half-brother. He was a child of the Su family too, but a bastard child born of a different mother. Despite the complications of their family backgrounds, Lu Jinnian and Su Jiamu had no estrangement between them. In fact, they shared a particularly strong bond. Qiao Anhao had only been able to speak with Lu Jinnian because of her connection to Su Jiamu. But even then, their interactions were limited to polite exchanges, greetings like hi, hello, or goodbye. Nothing more meaningful. When they were younger, there were fewer reservations. When she felt something for him, she would act on it, even if just a little. Qiao Anhao wasn't as bold as the other girls who could openly confess their feelings, write love letters, or give him chocolates on Valentine's Day. But she would silently pay attention to him. Occasionally, on the school playground or on her way home, she would run into him by chance and, despite her pounding heart, would force herself to act nonchalant and greet him calmly. Sometimes he would respond with a hi or a nod, and even though those exchanges were brief and shallow, they filled her with joy for days. She had fantasized about being with him, of course, but she never had the courage to confess. Their relationship remained lukewarm, neither too cold nor too close, and her feelings for him only deepened with time, growing into a love that was more than just infatuation, but a deep, enduring attachment. Then, when she entered college, something changed. Lu Jinnian's attitude toward her became noticeably colder, almost filled with disdain. At first, Qiao Anhao thought she was just being overly sensitive, that her feelings for him were clouding her judgment. But later, she unintentionally heard from Su Jiamu that he had someone he liked. Then another time she ran into him at a meal and couldn't help but ask him who he liked. Although Lu Jinnian had been impatient with her several times before, that time was the most impatient he had ever been. Even after so long, she still clearly remembers that at the time, he said to her with a very indifferent and cold expression, "It doesn't matter who I like, it will never be you." At that moment, she finally understood that Lu Jinnian truly hated her. Although she didn't know why he hated and loathed her, from then on, she tactfully began to distance herself from him. Just like Zhao Meng said, from that time onwards she and he hardly had any contact. Even if they occasionally met, they were like strangers with no communication. Even if they were forced to interact, the words he spoke were harsh and hurtful. Because she loved him so deeply, she cared about every word he said. Because she loved him so deeply, he could easily pierce the softest spot in her heart. Over time she became afraid to see him, afraid to talk to him, not for anything else, but because she was afraid that as soon as he opened his mouth, his words would make her bleed and suffer. In fact, she had always thought that she and he might not have any interaction, that the two would part ways and have nothing to do with each other. Until one day, fate played a dramatic hand and forced them together as husband and wife. God knows how happy and excited she was when she found out she was going to be his wife. She knew he hated her, so on their wedding night, she tactfully told him that she would not interfere in his life, would not affect him, and would not let anyone know about their relationship. She loved him too much, so that night, she took the initiative to seduce him, fueled by the intoxicating effects of alcohol. She thought that he must have truly loathed her to the extreme to be so angry after sleeping with her. She didn't want him to think that she had thrown herself at him because of those TV drama roles, but she had no choice. She could only make herself seem like those vain women who were willing to sell their bodies for fame and fortune to explain her actions that night. Because he had said, "It doesn't matter who I like, it will never be you." Thinking of this, Qiao Anhao's eyes became a little moist. After Lu Jinnian left, Qiao Anhao didn't fall asleep again until dawn. In the next few days she didn't see Lu Jinnian again, and she didn't even hear a single word about him. About a week passed, and Qiao Anhao saw news about the promotion of Lu Jinnian's latest film in the entertainment reports. She then learned of his whereabouts, filming in Rome. Life continued to move forward uneventfully, and in the blink of an eye, half a month had passed, reaching the end of April. Qiao Anhao had only been in the entertainment industry for just over half a year. She had neither fame nor popularity. Even though she had landed a role in Eternal Love, thanks to Lu Jinnian, the drama was currently in post-production and had not yet been released. Moreover, even the advertisements used well-known actors, so Qiao Anhao still had little recognition. No new films sought her out, and no endorsements needed her. This resulted in her having plenty of free time every day. Zhao Meng, on the other hand, had been fulfilling her responsibilities as an agent, constantly trying to arrange auditions for new films for her. The entertainment industry was always complex. Many times, being beautiful and having good acting skills wasn't enough to secure a role. Therefore, in the past half-month, Qiao Anhao had auditioned 8 times, each ending in failure. Today was Qiao Anhao's 9th audition, and the outcome was the same as the previous 8. No luck. Qiao, it's been almost a month. Not to mention a decent role, we haven't even successfully auditioned for a role like a protagonist's maid. which only requires a brief appearance. If this continues, we'll starve to death. Compared to Zhao Meng's impatience, Qiao Anhao seemed quite composed. She sat in the passenger seat, casually browsing her phone, and said in a calm tone, "Didn't we used to be like this?" As Qiao Anhao spoke, she happened to see Lu Jinnian as the top trending search on Sina Weibo. Her words stopped abruptly. After a while, she continued as if nothing had happened. "Besides, even if I starve to death, I won't let you starve. Of course I know you won't let me starve. Even when you didn't get any roles in the first half of the year, you still paid me my salary every month. However, Qiao, your parents only left you that much inheritance. You can't afford to keep this up," Zhao Meng said, glancing at Qiao Anhao through the rearview mirror. Seeing the words Lu Jinnian on her phone screen, she continued after a moment, Qiao, why don't you ask Lu Jinnian for another role? Take advantage of the fact that you can still benefit from him now and use him thoroughly. After all, this man isn't good to you. It's not like you owe him anything. Besides, his money has nothing to do with you. Your parents passed away early, and you were raised by your uncle since you were little. Don't tell me you're thinking of cutting ties with him in the future and going back to your uncle's house to live a dependent life?